man, thank you so much, buddy, for being a co-host. This is people don't realize this, but there's effort, right, to be in the co-host, right? You got to get here in the morning. You got to put up with Joe. That's right. That's right. So, what did you bring us to talk about today, buddy?
Yeah. So let's talk content first. The utilization of content to grow your business. And this is something you and I obviously have done a lot of content, right? You've been running the show, you just said, for 10.5 years and counting. And I've been running podcasts for about 6.5 years. And what I've noticed are two big aspects from me running the podcast. And the one that we have now is called the Anything But Typical Show. If anybody wants to listen, they can go to wherever they listen to podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever.
And those on Facebook, I just pulled it up on the World Wide Web, on the line.
Perfect.
I got it on the line. Anything But Typical. It's a great podcast that you put on. It really is exceptional.
Yeah, it's a huge attribute to the guests because they're just adding so much value, and we're starting to do the same thing of breaking down clips and things like that. We're following your footsteps, essentially, Joe.
Of course.
Right? What could go wrong from following what you've done?
You're right.
But yeah, we've noticed two really big things. One is the organic growth of business, meaning I'm co-hosting this show and somebody will reach out after a show when they happen to hear me and want to have a meeting about financial planning, wealth management, something like that. And that's not me talking about wealth management on the podcast. In fact, I'm doing most of the interviewing, right? So we're just bringing different guests on.
Right.
But it has organically put us in front of potential prospects. And then they'll come in and they'll reach out to us because they heard me on the show. And then they end up becoming clients, and then they end up referring people. And so there's a web of clients that we have now that I can directly draw a line back to the podcast being what led to that business.
And let me tell people, this is not a sales pitch. I didn't set this up for WSIC's new podcasting process that they have, but you can do that here locally. You can contact WSIC and they can help you do what Ben is doing. Ben, let's talk a little bit about Anything But Typical, because I went to the website this morning, right? And I started scrolling, and I mean, these are some who's who of large businesses. I mean, how did you get in contact with these people? I mean, these are some substantial people, you know. I'm looking at some of these. I mean, you know, founder of Reebok, you know, just great Shark Tank dude, you know.
Right.
I mean, just some really exceptional people, multi-millionaires. Where do you connect with them?
Yeah, so there are a few different ways. The most common is Gary Fry, my co-host. He's unbelievable at connecting other people and having a network and adding value to their lives. And so because of that, that gets reciprocated. He knows a lot of people trust him, so he's able to bring these people on. The Reebok founder, for example, Gary was doing a speaking event with Joe Foster. And so was able, while he was free, was able to come on and do our show. So that's the most common. We also are fortunate to serve business owners, so we hear a lot of interesting stories.
Right.
I had a prospect meeting yesterday morning, and this guy's going through his life story, and it's so interesting that in the middle of the prospect meeting, I'm thinking of how I need to get him on the show because his story is so phenomenal that people need to hear it.
Right.
So we'll bring clients on when we hear their story and it's interesting. We think there's value for the listeners. So those are the most common ways that we bring people on.
Okay. And I noticed that you have my number one, Cherie DeMeo, is one of your.
And so
I'm proud to say I think I introduced you to her, right?
So one of the times that I was on I think I was a guest and she was the co-host that month. And we had a great conversation. It was a ton of fun, the three of us just going around.
Right.
And then we met and connected afterwards. I think we got coffee or something, and then we got her on the show too.
And that's really what you and I are trying to talk about here. It really is just about helping people connect.
Yep. One thing that really helped me early on was I was a 26-year-old going into a new industry. I knew nobody. I was in the college coaching world before, so I knew nobody in the business world, especially in Charlotte. And when you reach out, do a cold reach out on LinkedIn and ask somebody to get coffee or something like that, you're going to get ignored or no's nonstop, right? And rightfully so. They don't know who I am or why I'd be meeting. They probably just think I'm going to try and sell them. So by starting a podcast and asking people to come on the show so I can share their story, now I'm starting by adding value in their lives, and they're much more willing to come on. They can talk about their business. They can talk about their stories, their lessons, and things like that. So I was able to sit down with individuals, especially early on in business, that I really had no way to access them otherwise if I were not running the podcast. And so that was a huge thing. And to your point earlier of saying they can come in like to this studio, for example, and just use the podcast setup, that's not the way it was when I started 6-7 years ago. So I had to figure out how to do a soundboard and hook up the microphone and overlay the audio and video. And I'm learning a whole new skill. Well, that's such a hurdle that most business owners are not going to take the time to do that.
That you just hit on what was going through my mind, Ben, which is I pick on my new board operator, Joe, right? Which, by the way, that's a lot of fun picking on him. But honestly, you can't do it. I mean, for me to learn what he's doing and how he's doing, he literally has about 9 things going on at the same time, right?
It's a full-time job.
And so that process frustrates us small business people. So when you and I say, make content, you know, the small business person listening is saying, are you kidding me? Yeah. I'm running my business. I don't have time to become a mini celebrity here.
Right.
I mean, what's your advice for them on that? Because it does frustrate them.
Yeah, it sounds great in theory, and then they don't have the time to actually go and do it themselves, right? So the fact that there are podcast studios all over the place now, and you don't have to figure out or buy the equipment and all that, and you can piggyback off of other people doing it, is much more common. So the hurdle is significantly lower. The second part is the mentality of your content needing to be perfect has faded away. It used to be everybody was used to television and radio, and everything was cleaned up. And so because of that, they weren't going to put anything out, any videos or pictures or anything like that on YouTube or a podcast because they thought it had to be perfect. Now you can turn on your phone, which the cameras on phones and the audio on phones are better than most cameras 5-10 years ago. They can flip that on and start putting anything out without having to be this huge production.
And what you're describing is just be genuine. I mean, that's what I found works, right? Because it certainly has nothing to do with professionalism when you look at Joe's videos, right? But they're real, they're genuine, the people know their topics, right?
Yep. In a world where everything is polished, people want authenticity. So go put yourself out there and just be real. And that, if you can do that, now all of a sudden all the hurdles go away. You just have to turn your camera on and put your ego aside and talk for a little bit.
Right. Well, you know, and that's what's so great about being, for me, right, being a part of WSIC, because without WSIC, I would have never known any of this, right? Yep. So all somebody really has to do is pick up the phone, call WSIC, and they will be able to literally hold your hand through the entire process. All you got to do is show up, do your thing, get out of there, and they'll take an hour interview and they'll literally break it up into, you could break it up into 20 different videos that then could be used for marketing and individual ideas.
You just hit on a huge
You didn't think I knew that, did you?
I don't. You've been around content long enough. I won't put any of this past you now. But the idea of producing 100 different videos to put out, you don't need to do. If you can produce one long-form piece of content that is audio and video, you can end up getting 20 to 30 clips, plus your long-form video, plus the audio version, plus you can transcribe it, you can get quotes from it. So from one piece of content, you can get 100 pieces of content.
Which is 1 to 2 months worth of content that could go out and be entertaining and also add credibility.
Yeah. So again, start stripping away those hurdles. You don't need to create 100 different videos. You create one piece of content and then you chip all of that away through audio, video, and written text, and you're going to get 100 different forms of content.
So I don't know if you realize this or not, but you just gave a commercial for WSIC's new podcasting.
Well, you're welcome. The invoice will be in the mail.
Well, honestly, what you're describing is what the new owner knows. The future is in this video direction, right? Audio direction. They have 2 studios that you could do it in the Cornelius area and or here in Statesville.
And we're seeing businesses do this too. So we had...
It's almost a necessity now, Ben, at some capacity.
Yep. You're getting a lot of companies that are actually building their own podcast studio in their own buildings or offices, and they're also renting that out to other people that want to do it. And so that's unique, that like you can go into Clean Juice and you can to one of their offices and you can actually record a podcast.
Right.
So I don't know if I know we're coming up on a break, but you have access to all the technology, all the equipment, things like that. All those hurdles are stripped away.
Let's take a break. When we come back, Ben, we're gonna hopefully we're gonna be talking with Blue Collar Cash author Ken Rusk.
Yeah, I think he's on. That's great.
If it's Friday morning, say it, Ben. Say it.
Your business matters.
Yeah.